So, Gavan, the day of departures, you were also temporarily left the group chat.
There was about 45 seconds there where I'd walked away from the group chat in a manner not seen since Joe McHugh walked away from his collective. It was such a frantic day that I meant to log out of WhatsApp web and I just left the group by accident, prompting frantic missives to Zara King as group admin, be like, please allow me back in.
I was like, Gavan's more eager to leave than Boris Johnson.
It's been that kind of news day.
Imagine, if you weren't allowed back into that group chat, you wouldn't be here now in the middle of the podcast.
So he texted me and was like, add me back in again.
That's it then, right, I'm off. Goodbye.
We giggled across the
I know when I'm not wanted.
He's gone again, folks. Hello, you're very welcome along to the group chat Meltdown Special live. I'm joined as ever by Chaos correspondent Zara King.
Chaos correspondent, I love it.
And Mayhem editor Gavan Reilly.
I'm going to put that on our supers on screen now. Those are brilliant titles.
We are live watching. We have our screens and our eyes trained across the water on Larry the Cat outside, number 10 Downing Street.
Larry the Cat is about to bring it up to 40 government resignations because it's been some exodus.
I think Larry actually resigned on Twitter yesterday, did he? Or he was saying he was certainly considering his resignation.
Yeah, that's all they need now is him gone. But we are expecting more resignations in the UK government this evening. They might happen on our watch, but already dozens, literally dozens, 38 government resignations from Boris Johnson's government.
I think it's literally 39 actually in the last couple of minutes because
the ticker rolls up.
The Northern Ireland secretary has resigned and the ticker hasn't caught up yet.
But they're all calling for him to go. He says it seems that he's not going anywhere, but that decision may soon be taken out of his hands. Gav, Boris Johnson has had his fair share of scandals.
Yes.
Probably more than any other Prime Minister you could shake a stick at.
Yeah. Should we probably explain
That's what
how did we get here? Yeah.
Why this scandal? Why have we got to a point now where so many people are leaving?
First of all, we should probably explain what this scandal is because actually the cause of this scandal has been somewhat overlooked given the pace of people resigning and it's hard to keep up with exactly why they're doing so. This all goes back to a man called Chris Pincher, who was, until last weekend, the Deputy Chief Whip for the Conservative government. And that meant that not only was he responsible for ensuring voting discipline and making sure that everything was able to get through the House of Commons whenever the Conservatives needed all their votes to be in line, but he was also responsible for basically receiving welfare concerns on the part of other Conservatives. So if they were having issues of a personal nature, if they were finding it tough to be away from home, or if they had any other sort of personal issue, or they needed to come for any kind of a counselling, Chris Pincher was the man to whom they were supposed to come. And all of this is quite important because Chris Pincher had to resign last week because he got drunk and then allegedly groped two men in a manner to which they were not comfortable or accustomed or expecting. And it would turn out that Chris Pincher has a history of allegations made against him. And originally Boris Johnson said, I wasn't aware of any of that. When I made him Deputy Chief Whip responsible for welfare issues, I had no idea that he had this history of alleged infractions behind him. Only then for the story to change because, well, he knew that there was some allegations but no specific ones. But then it turns out that he knew that there were specific ones and they said, well, there were no substantiated specific ones. And then it turned out that that wasn't true either. And in fact, there had been some complaints made against him previously, which were upheld. And moreover, that Boris Johnson was previously his boss when the two of them were in the Foreign Office and Boris was Foreign Secretary and Chris Pincher was a junior minister there. And so the two of them would have had a reasonable working relationship. And Boris Johnson was claiming that he knew nothing of Chris Pincher's previous history of alleged infractions. All of which has been something of a tipping point. We know that there's been a lot of unease about there's 40 resignations now, just as we're talking about.
Another PDF screen captured and tweeted out there by Jacob Young MP.
Jacob Young MP, that brings the resignations to 40. All of whom have basically... There was obviously a lot of people who were unhappy about Partygate and whether it was appropriate for the Prime Minister to stay in the job after he was found to have broken the law. But now you have a situation where the Prime Minister is still sticking there and not showing any kind of change of tack. A lot of people thought in the last month, after that motion of no confidence, Boris Johnson would come away scolded, would be a little bit more sensitive in how he ran the place, would show a little bit more humility. And the very fact that he has decided to brazen it all out and actively send people out to spin a line which wasn't true about how little or how much he knew has been the straw that has broken many backs.
And Gavan, what about this accusation that Chris Pincher was known as Pincher by name, Pincher by nature?
This is not going to be very highbrow political analysis, but I think it is illustrative of just the culture that there is in Westminster, that anywhere else, if you were told that someone's name was Pincher and that they had a history of inappropriate behaviour that some would describe as lecherous, a lot of which involved groping, and the guy's name is Pincher, if it isn't the first thing that you immediately associate with him whenever you hear his name afterwards, there must be a sign of either an organizational culture in which this kind of behavior is bizarrely commonplace, or it's a culture presided over by someone who appears not to care too much about what is proper conduct and what isn't.
Well, Boris Johnson there refused to deny earlier on that he said at some point that all the sex pests are with us.
Yeah.
When he appeared before a committee meeting earlier on today. But Zara, as Gavan's making the point there, like, Boris Johnson hasn't shifted at all from this.
No.
There's no intention there whatsoever.
It's unbelievable. Isn't it actually unbelievable to see him today? And he's still saying, get it done. Remember we laughed about this how many weeks ago when we said,
Yes.
he sort of keeps repeating.
What is the it?
You've got to get it done.
But he wants to get
But
it.
this is sort of the throwback to the get Brexit done sort of thing. Yeah, he hasn't faltered Richard, actually. And all his mates have gone round to the house to say to him, listen, time up.
This is the best part of
Imagine
this.
your friends waiting at home for you to be like, listen, again. You like us going around saying, listen, Richard, the jig is up. And you being like, no, lads, I'm sticking with it.
It's unbelievable. So over the course of the afternoon, you have had a load of cabinet members and the head of the Conservative 1922 committee, which is basically just sort of committee of the parliamentary party, all gone around to say, right, Boris, the jig is up, you're done. So effectively going around to his living room, sitting around awkwardly, waiting to tell their boss that he's done. But also a couple of his allies have gone in there as well, like Nadine Dorries and a couple of others who are basically there to say, no, keep going, fight on, buddy.
You're doing
So
fine.
you have competing groups of Tories there in what is probably the worst party at Downing Street since all of those other ones.
Since all those other parties, which apparently were not bad parties at all. I think that was the problem with them. What's remarkable is that some of the people going over to stage that intervention, telling the guy that he has to go.
Priti Patel.
Well, including Naheem Zahawi, who was appointed yesterday as the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, a guy to whom Boris Johnson gave a serious promotion on Tuesday, is going around on Wednesday evening and said, here, listen, buddy, your days are numbered.
Is
did he take the job just to plump out his Wikipedia byline for a day or two?
For a day or two. Is that because he has his own ambitions in terms of being the leader?
There was an allegation that he was demanding to be given that job or none at all, that Boris Johnson wanted to give the Chancellery job to Liz Truss, who is currently the Foreign Secretary, to whom he is a little bit more ideologically aligned. And that's how he had basically demanded it, or else he was going to walk, and Boris had given them the job in an element of frailty, which apparently has been denied by everyone involved, but nonetheless the story is still there. What Boris Johnson is doing is, like, the one thing that he can do, I suppose, is to call some bluffs, because the nature of the intervention that some of these ministers were trying to stage by going around to Downing Street this evening with like a box of, not a suitcase full of wine, maybe like a Swiss roll under one arm, a box of tea bags in the other, trying to stage a sober intervention. But they said, right, well, if you don't go, we're all going to quit, including the guy who he promoted only 24 hours previously.
Hell of a first day on the job.
Yeah.
But now Boris is basically calling their bluff and saying, right, well, I'm not going, so let's see if he does. And it will manufacture out of nowhere this element or this perception of strength and of a man who cannot be moved, if he has called the bluff of some of his own ministers and then they don't fall on their own swords. It's the one card that he's got left to play, which is why he's playing.
Quick fact check, just on stuff we've already said in this podcast. Brandon Lewis apparently denying that he's resigned.
Oh, back to
At this
39
point.
then. Okay.
Back to 39.
Actually, look, the ticker's gone back to 39.
We have had 39 resignations, Zara. Zara, what's your favourite resignation so far?
I mean, the smudged one that you tweeted last night was pretty good.
This is a guy
Who was
his name was Andrew Murrison.
It looked, so first of all, like, it's a lesson to all of us, wipe your lens before you take a photograph.
But why? Everybody else has got the idea right. It's a Word document or it's a PDF or whatever like that. You don't need to print it.
Like, screenshot a PDF.
If you're gonna tweet it, don't print it first. Stay in school. This is a fact.
Fair.
So smudgy camera, which he was either just out of the bath or something like that. He missed his deadline to do it. Straight from the shower, Andrew Murrison has resigned. Everybody gave him stick about it, so then he decided to tweet a photo of it again, which was a dry version, except it was folded up, probably fished out of the bin at that point. So 2 attempts, he has resigned there. There was also, I saw over the course of the day, there was a group resignation, which tells me that they're running out of paper. There was 5 of them resigning in one letter.
There'll be a running headed paper in the House of Commons by the end of all of this.
There's a queue for the printer, I'd say. But there was an Instagram one. Somebody put it up on Instagram first. Somebody just posted up
Quite
a photo.
2022, I would say.
I would say so.
Yeah,
somebody stood up against a balcony with a lovely idyllic backdrop, which
there
was
was
nice.
the one on I think one of the breakfast TV programs or one of the talk shows in Britain on Tuesday night. Someone who basically talked themselves into a resignation where they said, "Oh, this was terrible," and the host then put it to them. So that means then you're resigning, and they sort of went, "Well, I guess I am, I guess.
So, I mean, obviously,
Suppose so.
you know, we talked about the poor unfortunate researcher from one of the broadcasters, will remain nameless, who sent out that text sort of asking around if people were planning to resign, and if you fancy resigning on air,
That would be great.
let us know. And I mean, look, I think, you know, lifting the lid on journalism, what we like to do here, I think that's probably not an uncommon message that probably gets sent out in these types of situations. But
People are
it's
looking for the
unfortunate
story,
for that
yeah.
researcher that was made public.
Brandon Lewis is denying that he's resigned.
A source close to Brandon Lewis,
Okay.
as the saying
As the parlance goes.
has said that he has not
Okay.
resigned. And I will add the word "yet" is in there as
Because
well.
it was
Yeah.
So
being-
maybe he will go.
Yeah, well, it had been like tweeted by the official BBC Breakfast account, so I could have presumed that came with the imprimatur of
Yeah, but it has
Andy
been
P.
deleted as well, apparently.
Oh, has it?
oh,
So
right.
yeah, but one thing on Brandon Lewis, so he has been said to be in favour of Boris Johnson going, but he also was in Belfast today where he was handing over some sort of hamper I saw from a press release, and he got on the plane to try and get back, and airport chaos got the best of him, so he's delayed going back over. So I'm not sure if he's even in London yet. But he
Yeah.
was one of the lads who was meant to be turning up in the living room to say,
Okay.
all right, it's time to go.
Is that why he
Get
hasn't
there.
resigned yet? Because the plane hasn't landed and he needs to get his 4G coverage back before he can
Could be
send the
that.
tweet. Yeah.
I was going to say roaming charges, but that doesn't apply, and that's
No.
probably
Yeah.
political bombshell. But how is this going to go then? How is this going to go here from here on out, Gav?
Well, people will wonder why it is that the resignation of all these lower order people. In fact, people will probably wonder, first of all, how many jobs are there in the British government? And the answer is somewhere between 160 and 170. And people will wonder, how the hell did that happen? Basically, over time, government in Britain has become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger all the time and needs more people to run it. Partly because of the coalition between the Tories and the Lib Dems back in 2010, where there was a sort of a jobs for the boys arrangement where everyone had to get some title or other, so it became very big. But also post-Brexit, they've now announced and appointed a lot of these trade envoys, jobs which previously couldn't exist because the UK didn't control its own trade policy. So now you have, not only is there the secretaries, the people who attend cabinet, and then the ministers who are the people underneath them, and then you also have trade envoys, you have other party office holders like Deputy Chair who resigned last night, you have parliamentary private secretaries who are unpaid junior ministers who are basically the eyes and ears of other people and who don't get paid for the job. But it means that there's about 170 people involved in government one way or another, which is why 40 odd of them can resign and the place can still trundle along. But people will then wonder, well, you know, how does this end? And it's actually significant that all these people at the bottom of the food chain are resigning, because you're getting to a point where Boris Johnson's not going to be able to replace them, because there are so many people in the party who have already announced one way or another that they don't have confidence in the man, that when it comes to trying to find a new trade envoy to Morocco, for example,
He hasn't got the bodies to do it.
He hasn't got the bodies to do it, which means, in a literal sense, he can't form a government. Now, you could just abolish all those jobs again and trundle
Yourself
along.
and Nadine Doris could be like Mr. Burns and Smithers and Simpsons, where they have to take over the running of the plant themselves. And
But basically, like the Fianna Fáil coalition from like late 2010 or early 2011, where you've got 7 people running the entire country. But that's where it's getting to, where it may be the case that when Boris Johnson tries to staff the government again after this exodus, he might find that he's got nowhere else to go, and that might force his hand a little bit. But of course, that would be a concession of some sort, which we're not likely to see from him, because he's been so headstrong in insisting that he's going to get on with the job and get it done.
Get it done. I was in London when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister because you couldn't go, Gavan, at the time because you were having a baby.
Not personally, but it's,
No, well,
yeah.
obviously, yeah.
I was on
but-
paternity leave.
So
Yeah,
I
which is
was given the job because the political
3 years
correspondent
next month.
was unable. Yeah, so I feel like Darren is a visual representation, I
She
suppose,
is.
of the 3 years.
God love her.
I know, God love her. But I remember being there at the time. So he beat Jeremy Hunt in the Conservative leadership contest at the time. And I looked back on it today. He beat him by 60. He got 66% of the vote at the time. So he was obviously a very popular choice within the Conservative Party. I remember, speaking to members of the public at that time, and there was obviously very mixed views on it. But Boris Johnson always had that sort of like bumbling fool kind of. He was almost endearing, and people sort of found it, almost sort of like acceptable.
It was his London mayor persona.
Absolutely. And, we all remember the famous images of him sort of, there's always a photo call where Boris Johnson sort of half made a fool of himself. But that is really worn thin with the British public. And you really see that now in the coverage. If you see any of the sort of vox pops that are coming in, I think it was Channel 4 News, it was the BBC last night, had been in a pub, just down in a local pub kind of chatting to punters. And people are just so done with it. And I think as well, the same as here, people in Britain are like, listen, cost of living, fill in our cars, let's get on with the business of the day. And that's really what a lot of the resignations are kind of echoing as well.
It seems as well to be a lot of straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Like, it does seem like there's a turning point if you look at the polls about where British people were in relation to Boris Johnson, that the Partygate thing kind of tipped it for them. Like the poll last night, 69% of British voters think Boris Johnson should resign. That was by YouGov. Funnily enough, the group co-funded by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who again now, it's just been reported in the last couple of minutes, has today told Boris Johnson he should resign. And tomorrow...
That's the new Chancellor. That's Nadeem Zahawi.
Yeah, Nadeem Zahawi.
Yeah.
He has today tomorrow he's agreed to launch a new economic plan alongside Boris Johnson.
That press conference will go completely to plan.
God,
Sounds great.
It. The thing about Boris Johnson, though, like when he was appointed, like we nearly forget because it was so long ago, but when he won that general election in December 2019, it was because Brexit had not yet been achieved. And it really was get Brexit done. And it had been this kind of mortifying civil war in Britain for 4.5 years that people just wanted it ended. So they said, right, elect this guy. He's got this oven-ready deal. Give him enough MPs, he'll pass it. And then we don't have to talk about it again. Yeah. And that sort of worked Brexit will never, ever be done. We'll be dealing with its consequences forever.
Yeah.
But he, at least then, he stumbled into a pandemic, which has still then led to Partygate, which is sowing the seeds for where we are right now. But this is what happens when you elect someone for a 5-year term and they get the main thing on their agenda done within like 6 weeks. But what else are they going to do?
Yeah, I think you're right about that, though, Richard. It was Partygate. I mean, the Platinum Jubilee, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, himself and his wife arriving at the Platinum Jubilee and being booed by what were effectively Conservative voters, royalists. I think that was a real moment of like the jig is up here for Boris Johnson. The only person who doesn't realise it is Boris Johnson.
Well, he's kicking and screaming is the only way for him to go. A couple more highlights I had from the last day or so of this. Nadine Dorries, when she put out a tweet of support for Boris Johnson, Sky News in such a hurry that they didn't crop out the first reply. So it's basically, it was her saying, I'm not sure anybody doubted me, but I'm 100% behind Boris Johnson, the PM who consistently gets all the big decisions right. The first reply under it was satire is dead. And obviously Boris Johnson literally been televised on Sky News literally the moment
minutes
before,
earlier,
owning up for a mistake he had made around
which is the appointment of Chris Pincher,
I mean, it feels very the thick of it, doesn't it? Like the whole thing is just...
It is chaotic.
So
and here's just on the thick of it sort of thing. In the House of Commons earlier on today, when Boris Johnson was saying, I have a plan, I'm going to get us through it, like the backbenches of his own party were braying for him. One man, Alex Shelbrook, and I'm okay to say this because it was on the record of the House of Commons, he apparently mouthed bollocks and performed a throat-cutting gesture.
We're going to have to put an explicit tag on this podcast.
Yes.
So producer Killian is in the back of the studio.
I don't know where the sliding scale bollocks is, but that's where it is. And it's fine. It's in Hansard now.
Oh dear.
Zara, do you think that people or the Irish government, because it does seem now it's coming to a denouement of some description, whether or not Boris Johnson wants it, it does seem like there will be a vote next week which could see him turfed out in that no confidence motion by the Conservative Party. But do you think that the government here, how do you think they'll be feeling about this?
Well, so you met Leo Varadkar this morning and then I met him an hour after you and I didn't know that you'd already asked him the same question. So I ended up asking Leo Varadkar the same question.
Was he at least consistent? Did he give the same answer?
Actually, yeah. Because I didn't realise you were going to Leo this morning as well. So I met Leo and asked him the same question and he gave me the same answer in which he said that, look, the Irish government would work with whoever was the British Prime Minister and said that he wouldn't. I said, who do you fancy for the job? He said, I'm not going to tell you that. Of course, I've got something in mind. I'm not going to tell you that. I mean, privately, a few people I've spoken to today in the Irish government definitely want him gone. Like,
no secret.
It's really,
Leo was out last week on the BBC sort of saying, like, well, relations have never been as bad. Obviously,
never been as bad.
Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Never been as bad.
Definitely.
Well, like, I mean,
from
between...
like a colonial power.
In terms of relations
Recent
between
history.
ministers in both governments, in terms of Dublin and London, at least in recent memory, you can obviously point to historical precedents where that's obviously not the case.
Okay.
But the point is, there will be a lot of cheering around Merrion Street, perhaps, privately. They won't do it publicly about Boris Johnson going. But
some of it will be public if Sajid Javid becomes the next PM because he is very close friends with Pascal Donoghue since the time they were both finance ministers.
Do you know who else is actually relatively close to Pascal Donoghue? Is the other lad, Rishi Sunak, who apparently is also a big Star Wars fan, just like Pascal Donoghue. The strangest things will bring people together. But anyway, if there is too much celebrating on an Irish government level around this, they might be tempered somewhat by the virtue of the fact that we're not to be fully outdone. We have our own chaos here.
We do. I will just say, by the way, that better the devil you know maybe than the devil you don't, because Liz Truss, remember, is the person behind this protocol scuppering legislation, and she might be the favourite to become the next Prime Minister. So you could have the architect of all of that, like deepening her roots in number 10. But yeah, we are not totally out of the woods from political scandal ourselves or political instability, because as we record this evening, the government in Ireland, the tripartite Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Green Party coalition, is now a minority. Because this evening there has been a vote on Mica legislation in the Dáil, the redress scheme to try and help people rebuild their homes that were built with defective blocks in counties Mayo and Donegal and Clare and everywhere else along the west coast. And Joe McHugh, the Fine Gael TD for Donegal, has voted against the government and has resigned the whip. And that means that now, in a chamber of 160, only 79 of them actually belong to a government party, which means that the government doesn't necessarily have the ability to get stuff passed anymore.
Now, Joe McHugh flagged this for a long time, though, didn't he?
This was something which is danger,
he's been saying this the whole way through.
Yes,
From the start of this campaign in Donegal, he had said, look, these are my people, I represent these people. If they're not happy with this deal, I will be with them. And, like, he's been a man of his word on that, it has to be said.
To be fair,
A lot of flack for it,
Yeah,
it's taken a lot of flack. He'd already announced that he wasn't going to be contesting the next election anyway. He said that was for family reasons because it's a long commute and his family are small and he wanted to see more of them. But it has liberated him a little because he doesn't have to worry about how the electorate are going to respond to him were he to follow the party whip in future.
And I guess he kind of leaves with the sort of, reputation of being loyal to his constituents, which I think is probably an honourable way to leave.
There to the end. Now, people will probably wonder, by the way, why didn't we make this the top story? Because,
just about to ask you that.
Because it's what we talked about, Britain for 20 minutes, and now we're just kind of doing as a by the by what's happening in Ireland. The reason is because on a very practical level, Boris Johnson could be gone in a day or two. This does not mean that the Irish government is gone. The fact that they don't command a majority vote in the Dáil, it's not an automatic thing where someone goes in tomorrow and says, right, out you go, in pops Mary Lou and a whole coalition of others. There has to be a vote, some sort of critical vote in which the government is beaten. And there is no sign necessarily of that actually happening because we're in a situation where, although there are only 79 official government TDs, there are 2 suspended Greens who are going to be on their way back, they hope, in a couple of months, which would bring you back to 81. Joe McHugh has seemingly assured Leo Varadkar that even from the outside, he will support the government in any critical stuff, which brings them back to 82. And you have a few other independents like Michael Larry and Noel Grealish who would often support the government anyway. So when push comes to shove, they probably have enough votes to get through. It's narrow and you are reliant on favours from some people you can't control, but they are probably okay for the foreseeable no matter what anyway.
One thing on the horizon, Zara, which might put that a little bit to the test is the budget. We are in a cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
The summer economic statement, which will set the parameters for the budget, was announced by the government this week. Something like €6.7 billion package to be lined up. One of the things which they've done now, or announced now, is a list of back-to-school measures to help families. You were at the launch of that. That's something which, on paper, would be quite popular to a lot of families. But there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, so this was a kind of a last-minute press conference that was called, actually, because the three of us were sort of scrambling in the group chat ourselves, saying who would make it to it. So basically, it was Heather Humphreys, Social Protection, Education, Norma Foley, and Michael McGrath, Deeper. So yeah, it was quite a impressive announcement. 3 government ministers wheeled out for something that really. Look, there's a couple of things to it. It's a €67 million investment. It's an extra €100 for parents who are getting the back-to-school allowance. But the truth of the matter is that about 260,000 children will benefit from that. In a population of 5 million people in this country, 260,000 is
there's about 950,000 between primary and second level, so it's a little over a quarter of that, which is fine, but it doesn't affect the other 3 quarters. Yeah.
And the reaction to it has been absolutely astounding. I was saying to you today, the messages have just been rolling in from people because, again, what's really shocking about this whole situation is actually that Leo Varadkar had been speaking on radio yesterday morning saying that, cost of living affects everybody, that, where there would be targeted supports, of course. His premise was that, we help everybody and then we go in with the further targeted measures for people who really are worst affected. And that was put to Heather Humphreys yesterday. We ran her over that a couple of times and said, look, the Taoiseach said, your party leader said today that everyone would get the help, and yet you're coming out this evening, 3 government ministers, and saying these are targeted supports for, albeit the people who need it most, and nobody disputes that.
And the worst affected by inflation.
Yeah, and nobody's sitting here saying that they shouldn't get that. And sorry, just to be clear as well, they've waived the cost of school transport as part of the scheme as well. But just in terms of those squeeze middle, again, they're the people who are really frustrated by this. Just going to take you through some of the messages that we received on this. So one lady saying, all families should be receiving a back-to-school payment. It is not just low-income families who are struggling. I have 3 children. My eldest is going into first year. €800 for the new compulsory tablet and books also have to be bought. That's €350, and uniform is approximately another €300. No book rental scheme available in our school. It is going to be so hard.
It is, and it is going to be brutal, and this is going to be the big challenge, I suppose, that the government has. And this is what they were doing when they were announcing the summer economic statement, is that we have to be targeted about it. We aren't going to tell you what we're going to do. It's going to be a mix of one-off measures. It's going to be this, that, and the other. Because this is probably now the immediate issue which defines whether or not this is a successful government. So they were announcing that a big hullabaloo around the summer economic statement. Confidential briefing was done then by officials at the Department of Finance. It actually led to a lighter moment when you had all these, grey-suited officials wearing spectacles at the Department of Finance who are briefing journalists on the Zoom call, effectively, and one unnamed radio station representative came on playing interpretive jazz music very loudly over these PowerPoint presentations. So you just hear,
Oh my God, I love that.
he was kicked out and then let back in at a very crucial point where the saxophone just reached an absolute cacophony.
It's astonishing. I love that.
More
Fiscal
briefings.
jazz.
You tell us afterwards who that was.
We'll tell you, yeah.
Tell you later.
Put your guesses in now.
Aye, yeah.
But another thing, the central bank was out today, and this news is going to be released on Thursday morning when you're all listening to this. Inflation is still going to spike for the next couple of months. Now, the central bank expects that the cost of living, i.e. inflation, is going to dip back down towards the end of this year, but there will be a further spike until around August at least, and it will be over the 10% mark. Also, household incomes aren't going to recover until sometime into next year. So inflation, even though it's going to come back down towards the end of this year, it's still going to be outpacing the real household incomes that people have. So people are still going to be feeling the cost of living crisis for many, many months to come.
I remember being at a separate central bank briefing in person, actually having to sit down with the governor of the central bank just before Christmas last year, or maybe just after Christmas this year, and him saying, this is only a short-term thing. This is the fallout from the blockage of the Suez Canal last year. Supply chains are disrupted. It'll all work itself out, and inflation will go back down again. And that was their official advice a couple of months ago, that it would be a really short-term, fleeting thing. And it didn't.
Nope.
And so you have to take any more suggestions that this will sort of peter out by the end of this year with a heavy pinch of salt for that reason. And just on the summer economic statement, because people will get the headline figure of 6.7 billion and they will think, God, loads of money. Like this is giveaway stuff. It's not at all, because 3 billion is already committed to like demographic stuff. Basically, you have to fund the health service by more, because with a bigger population, you need to fund more services. So you spend a lot of money literally just to stand still. And actually, in practical terms, to fall backwards, because if inflation is 10% and you're not increasing state spending by 10%, then you are, in real terms, actually cutting. But then when you look at what they've got left to spend, so for spending increases or tax cuts, people, we've talked a lot about filling the car and how expensive petrol and diesel is, and the cut there was a couple of months ago. That's only a temporary cut. Yeah. It's supposed to expire again in October. So if you're going to have to review that and renew it, and they're surely not going to allow it to go back up again while people are still struggling, it costs more money to renew it. Basically, you could eat up nearly €750 million immediately by extending that excise cut and the lower VAT on household energy. And you spent most of your tax package without doing anything to make things cheaper than they are right now. So just don't be fooled by hearing a headline figure and thinking, God, bonanza now, we're all going to get something. Because actually, if you try and give something to everybody, it doesn't go very far at all.
The things are that the government has been stressing is that they're going to have some stuff which is going to help now. But when they were announcing the statement, they were like, well, we can't tell you exactly what's going to kick in this year. There was a figure of like €400 million, which they might be able to do now. They've also resisted all the pushes for an emergency budget, as in announce something right now to help people. Do you think that's going to stick with people? Do you think people are going to be content to wait until September to figure out everything?
Absolutely not. They're just not. Like, this is another comment, Richard. This is in response again to the back to school, saying, look, we have 2 car loans. We're not very well off. We live rurally. We need both of our cars to get to work. We have a small mortgage and our oldest is starting college in September. They say we won't qualify for a grant either, as we're a couple of thousand over the income band. We're in the group that gets absolutely nothing yet, because we live rurally. We both have big fuel bills, electricity, etc. I am at my wit's end, wondering how we're going to keep it all afloat without taking out credit union loans, more debt that won't be taken into consideration. And those are the messages every single day. I get messages like that. You get them. We, the three of us, talk about this every single. We share them with each other every single day. And they've become more and more frequent, and we're getting more and more messages like that. So the idea that the government thinks that people will tip away and be fine and we'll wait and see what happens in September is kind of delusional, to be honest.
And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, and I know we need to move on, but I think it is also worth saying, without trying to be too pessimistic, because this is going to be a very downbeat note, there is no sign of things ever getting cheaper. We might get to a point where inflation stops and things remain as expensive as they are right now. there is very little sign of anything happening where the cost of energy comes down and therefore the price of everything else comes down as well. At best, if inflation stops, prices don't get any higher. But it's a whole different thing about them coming lower again. So people will then have to learn to live with those higher costs baked into everyday life forevermore and not necessarily having any more money in their pockets to deal with it.
One thing on the energy thing as well, which actually the Central Bank, the Department of Finance, and now the EU have all said, is that there does seem to be at least a little more warnings coming out about what happens if Russia pulls the plug on gas to Europe and the knock-on it'll have here. We don't have a huge amount of gas from Russia, but economically, that is a juggernaut about to hit Europe if that does happen. One thing which costs a hell of a lot of money and could cost a lot more than even the government says is a little thing we should get all aboard on, and it's called the Metrolink.
Oh, God.
Eamon
What a
Ryan,
segue.
and what he described as a mega project. Does it cost 9.5 billion? Does it cost 12.2 billion? Does it cost 23 billion?
Does it cost 6 billion?
Tell you who doesn't know. Tell you who doesn't know. The government. Interesting tidbit revealed in the Irish Independent, actually, about this private memo from the Public Expenditure Minister, Michael McGrath, who stressed that it was inappropriate for the government to be selling this to the public as something which cost 9.5 billion euro because big projects have a tendency, not just in Ireland,
To run over.
running over. And when they run over, they run big over.
Yeah.
And so basically he was just saying, look, we need to be careful. You need to be responsible about this. It's going to become a stick which people can beat us with if we say it's 9.5 billion and then it's been more than twice.
If you think Dermot Bannon goes over budget, you should see the Irish government.
You want to get the QS out there for the budget to try and keep this thing under control.
It's a hell of a project, Gav.
What's remarkable about all of that, though, is that so this was signed off by Cabinet on Monday.
Yeah.
On Tuesday morning, Leo Varadkar was speaking on News Talk and told Pat Kenny, it could be an extreme case, could be up to 23 billion. And that was then put to the press conference, at which Michael McGrath was present. And Eamon Ryan stood up in Michael McGrath's vicinity, sat beside him, and went, nah, probably going to be closer to 7 billion. Even after Michael McGrath
what a
had
stretch,
warned
like.
him
Stop
at
underselling the
Cabinet
cost of it.
that it could be as high as 23.
But would you not think the lads would have had a meeting, and been like, here's the number. Let's all stay on message. Would that not surely have been, Gavin? Come on,
but by
surely.
their own admission, they don't know how much it's going to cost because they haven't put it out to tender. All they've agreed
And
to do
also building materials. Anyone who's trying to do up their gaff at the moment will tell you the building materials are obviously...
And it's gotten an awful lot dearer now from what it was supposed to be the last time that they announced it, which was last year when it was only supposed to be an expected 3 billion. Now already they're talking about probably mid of the road price 9.5 or possibly more. And of course, once upon a time it was supposed to be for originally a couple of 100 million or maybe 2 billion.
2
at
billion.
a stretch.
It was look, there's been so many announcements of this, and this goes way back. The year 2000 is the first proper government announcement about this, when it was called the Metro. I think it was just called the Dublin Metro, and they had all these old maps and all that sort of stuff. It's a lot smaller of a plan now.
Yeah.
19.4 kilometres, 16 stations from Swords to the city centre, to the airport, to the South City Centre. 25 minutes end-to-end journey time. 3 minutes every train.
Really selling it for the people of Fingal there.
Unbelievable. But
We've pulled out a clip from the archive. We should play that now, should we?
play the clip. This is back from when is this from, Gav?
This is from August 2002, 20 years ago next month.
This one has producer Brian in it.
Where producer Brian, who at the time was reporter Brian, was speaking to the then Minister for Transport, Seamus Brennan, about why the delay with the Dublin Metro and when was it actually going to be delivered. And here is a clip of hubris about when it all was going to get underway.
The Minister has denied reports that it's going to miss its deadline by years. The Minister said the government is committed to having that Metrolink completed on schedule.
It'll be separately funded and extracted from the general Metro plan. And the government have decided that that's a priority and must go ahead urgently. That will be finished by 2007. That's the target we've set ourselves.
It's been claimed the cost of building the line, half of which will go underground, has soared. But the Dublin Transportation Office is sticking by its estimate of €2 billion instead of the 20 billion suggested today.
So guaranteeing that it would run in 2007 and that it would only cost you €2 billion. Not the 20 that they're
Not 20
I have to say,
Not
I do
20.
love a dig into the news library to see that sort of stuff come back up.
you love
It's
to see it.
brilliant.
The thing about it is, this is such a good it's on face value. It's such a good project. It's important. We haven't had a rail link in the airport. It's nonsense that we haven't. But there's such a thing in this country about these mega projects, whether it's the Bertie Bowl, whether it's the Whitewater Rafting Centre, Dublin Docklands.
Was the Whitewater...
That's done.
Was that actually a real proposal?
Yeah.
It really
It
sounds
was
like
fought
something
over a
you see
lot.
on a national lottery ad, isn't it?
It was every water slides for National Lottery, yeah. It was. Almost literally, the mock-up photos are very much
Why
like
does the
that.
National Lottery think that everyone would want to have
Dublin
a
City
water
Council
slide in
won
their
the Euro
town if
Millions,
they won
and
the
that's what they
lotto?
wanted to do.
Such a bizarre.
But there's so many of these projects over the years which just haven't happened.
Yeah.
This is something which, like, I think it has cross-party support. I think everybody wants to see it happen. It's just like, how many times can you announce the
You know who
same
doesn't
thing?
want to see it happen is the people who are going to lose the green in their housing estate for it.
Apparently this is
There's
a
been
thing.
a few people now who've been like,
We got a few.
Think of the
messages about
children,
that.
where will they play?
Yeah. Well, there's no danger of them losing their places because by the time like they lose the
be
green space,
reared by the time
they're
it's
not going to be
done.
children
Don't
anymore.
worry about it.
But also, like, if you do agree that it has to be done, then whether it's 6 or 7 or 9 or 13 or 23 billion, it's never going to be any cheaper than today. Because that's how construction
Yeah.
works. You never get a situation where you build a massive infrastructural project and then a couple of years later it turns out you could have done it for half the price if you'd only waited for the market to come down. The best time to do it is 20 years ago. The next best time, if you think it should be done, is now. But let's see the planning permission go in and then actually put a shovel in
sound
the
like my
ground.
friend who works in pensions who says, do you know when the best day to start a pension is the day you start to work? And the second best day to start a pension is today.
Yeah.
Good infomercial stuff there.
There is actually, just before we do move on from it, a lot of the very nice stations in the city centre involve flattening a lot of buildings that people are quite attached to, like the Markowitz Leisure Centre just behind Tower Street Station. So a
Plan
lot of
to
that,
rebuild that elsewhere. Like,
if they could find the site,
Yeah.
which they can't. So let's see how the planning permission goes.
we will definitely be talking about the Metrolink again if we're doing.
We could be talking about this forever.
Like when our children are doing some sort of follow-up podcast.
If
they're still
podcast-
adults.
Richard and I don't even have any children. So.
Yeah, I'd say 2034 seems to be the estimated time of delivery of this. That's 12 years time. This
Boris Johnson
project-
will still be in Downing Street.
Yeah. Still hanging on to the drapes, refusing to go. I'm still watching the screen here of Sky News and what's happening live. The PM said to be in buoyant mood, no intention of resigning. There's been a sort of a convoy of men in suits walking up and down Downing Street to get in the door. Another place where you'd see plenty of people in suits coming and going. I'm the king of these segues. These are
You're
brilliant.
honestly, they're so
sensational.
good. Like,
That's
I really
sensational,
think,
yeah.
you know what, you've won the segue.
Have you heard of this trend called Gentleminions?
I hadn't heard of it till you brought it up yesterday on the meeting.
I've heard of it and do not understand it, either sociologically or in any
I've
other
also
way.
never seen the Minions movie, but I feel like
I've not
would-
either.
I
Not
feel like
either.
we should go see it. I think I'd like it.
Not wearing
Can we-
suits, though.
on.
I was
We
going to
have
say,
the seats on.
can we borrow your kids to go to the cinema?
Yeah,
Would that be okay?
by all means, give me and Kira a few hours
take your
respite.
kids to
By
the
all
cinema,
means.
yeah.
For the uninitiated, Gentleminions, there's a Minions film out called Minions, I think it's 3.
So this
some
would be
studio's going to get on to me
the
for getting that
fourth
wrong.
or fifth film in the Despicable Me series franchise.
The Rise of Gru, number 1 movie in the world, apparently.
They're
But
very cute.
There's been a big trend of people on TikTok, notably teenage boys, 16, 17-year-olds, who have all put on their suits, gone in big gangs of people, all imitating the Gru hand gesture thing, and just going to
I love that you
see.
just. Please watch the video to see Richard do that hand gesture.
I'll
It's
do
like,
it
it's
down
like the
camera 4 there.
it's like the
Where
Merkel
is he? Go
diamond
down camera 4
sort
there.
of thing.
What is it?
Camera 4.
What does
It's
it
like
mean?
Mr. Burns doing the excellent thing.
Oh,
It is a bit like
yeah.
that.
Richard, there we go. Do it again.
There we go,
Down
there we
again
go.
There, yeah. That's lovely.
I'll encourage people who are listening in audio
How
to put on the
fantastic.
YouTube channels. There we go. We're cross-promoting. But they're all going and they're doing this. They're all cheering along and having a great time and posting on social media, and it has driven the attendance. So the studio has said, well done, thanks everybody for coming out. However,
Cinemas aren't happy.
there has been a ban put in many cinemas in Ireland and Britain on young fellas wearing suits coming in. First time ever, young fellas have been banned for wearing good
literally
clothes.
just think-
Like,
thinking,
they're getting the second wear out of the dead
We've
suit.
come so far from when there was this idea of like banning people from wearing hoodies in shopping malls because they were
Oh my
considered to be
God,
an
so are
antisocial
suits
threat.
now the new like
Suits and the new
Asbo hoodies vibe? Like, is that it?
What are we
You're
going to
not
have to
getting into those black shine shoes, like,
yeah.
What are we
Not
going to have to start
tonight,
wearing on
lads, not
telly then,
tonight.
Richard? If suits are now like completely rejected, what are we going to have to start wearing on telly?
I know,
They're like-
we should get t-shirts made up, like, just like branded
Remember when we
t-shirts.
started this podcast, we had all these intentions of dressing mad casual, and then none of us have no time to go home and get changed.
It's time to take off a tie this evening. That's how wild today it was.
So
happens.
we just come in the way we've been at work all
Yeah.
day because we just can't.
I just don't like. Okay, if it's different if you're like a 16-year-old, but I just can't ever imagine how getting in a suit would ever be considered a recreational thing.
I think it's probably because you don't have any other reason to.
I love that.
So you have a bit of
I'm
a thing,
so
it's a
here
reason
for
to.
that. Yeah.
But like, so apparently they've been banned because apparently a lot of them have caused chaos and commotion and standing up, yelling and roaring and filming in the middle
But
of
didn't you say that
Disrupting
some of
it for
them
kids
are
and
taking nice photos of the kids with the cardboard cutouts and stuff?
This is the thing. So
Yeah.
basically, like, there's been a sort of a mixed response to this. So basically, in some studios or in some cinemas, there's been uproar and chaos. In some, the young fellas are helping out the actual kids who've gone to see the Minions, The Rise of Gru, and they've taken like loads of photos of small kids with the Minions cutouts just for them and making sure they have a nice time.
They're being gentlemen at
More of
Minions. Ergo, Gentleminions.
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 Still can't imagine why you'd ever want to put on a suit recreationally, though. One thing I hate about my line of work.
Oh my God, here we go. To finish the podcast, the
Oh,
Prime Minister has sacked Michael Gove. Unbelievable.
So he has called the bluff. He has called the bluff then of the people who have gone in and told him that he needs to go. Then not only is he hanging around,
Oh my
he
God.
is sacking the defectors. He is crushing the saboteurs.
This is unbelievable.
There's a reference.
Unbelievable.
The greased piglet that is Boris Johnson. One last gambit for that greasy pig.
Suspect this is a topic which we'll run on and which we will come
That
back to in
was some
future
finisher. I
instances.
can't believe he sacked him.
He might well be gone by the next group chat.
Could be gone by the time this
I will-
podcast comes out.
I
Who
bet you he
knows?
won't. Him and the bloody Metrolink will be going at the same time. So they will.
Well,
They spent so much money doing up number 10 for himself and Carrie and the kids. They can't possibly leave them
Don't
there.
mention the war, that wallpaper.
well, when we're back this time next week, we'll find out what's happened to Boris Johnson and on what comes out of all the rest of these stories. But for now, that's it. That's all we have time for
On that
the group
bombshell.
chat today. Zara, Gavan, chaos and mayhem correspondents and editors alike. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.